friends, today I'm gonna do my July wrap up. So overall, in July, I read a whopping 18 books. I am so happy with this month. It was just a really great reading month, and obviously Reading Rush helped quite a lot with that as well. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in the month, minus the 8 ones that I read in the Reading Rush. I'm going to quickly mention them when we get there chronologically, but if you want to hear my thoughts on the books that I read during the Reading Rush, I have a separate Reading Rush wrap up, because I just felt like that, you know, a 8-book Reading Rush definitely deserved its own wrap up, and then obviously I would have split this anyway with 18 books, so it just made sense. But yeah, I'm just gonna go through what I've read chronologically and let's see how well I remember what I read in the beginning of the month, because it feels like that was forever ago. So first I listened to This Song Will Save Your Life by Lila Sales, narrated by Rebecca Lohman. Now this is something that I've been wanting to read for a super long time, like even back in the day when I wasn't really super interested in YA contemporaries. This was one of the books that like really stood out to me and that I just always really wanted to read. So I finally managed to fucking read it, and it was an interesting experience. I generally definitely liked the themes and topics of the book. I definitely enjoyed the characters and the general storyline, and I definitely felt myself relating to a lot of things, but then also in a different way I also realized how far I have come, and that's what made this reading experience really special for me. This deals a lot with mental health. I was actually really surprised. There is a really like intense self-harm scene pretty much in the beginning of the book. It's pretty rough at the beginning, and I was like, oh my god, what? I didn't expect that. I didn't know that that was a theme in there. But yeah, I just ended up dealing a lot with like mental health, more than I was expecting, especially considering that this is at this point, you know, a couple of years old. But I just found myself just being really happy with realizing that I would have related to it a couple of years ago, but no longer really do. To me, it just kind of showed how far I have come when it comes to my mental health, and that was obviously like just a really good experience, and I just really appreciated that this book kind of showed me something to relate to, but also to be like, okay, I'm no longer feeling like that or whatever. So I definitely really liked that, and that made the reading experience just really special. But overall, I just didn't feel like super emotionally attached to it. I just had like an enjoyable time reading it. Had some issues with the kind of main relationship in the book, because the guy is kind of older, and I think it was like technically legal, but it was just one of those relationships where it felt like there wasn't really a balance. They never really talked about the fact that their relationship is kind of questionable when it comes to age. Like the relationship ended up kind of being shown as a little bit questionable, but not because of the age. I think that's kind of what I'm trying to say. And so I was a little bit like about that. But overall, I'm just glad that I finally read it. I definitely expected it to be just a little bit more about music, but it is not so much about like music itself and how music feels to you and what music does to you. It's just about the main character like being a DJ, and that's kind of the music aspect. So I think that was a little bit disappointing for me. But yeah, it was a fine read, and now I've finally read it and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Then I listened to the audiobook of A Fire and Stars by Audrey Coulthurst. This was a reread for me. I read this book sometime around when it originally came out, and to prepare for the sequel I listened to the audiobook, and when I originally read this I gave it 3 stars, and I liked it more upon reread, which I was not expecting that. Like obviously I really loved Audrey Coulthurst's Ink Mistress, so I was excited to go into this reread, but I didn't really think that like my opinion on it would change very much. But this was just such a delightful reread for me. I think that maybe now knowing that it has a sequel, this just had a little bit of a different feel to it. Like I remember being just a little bit bored by a lot of the political intrigue, because we never really see the consequences of the conflicts in this book. But obviously now knowing that there is a sequel and that we are gonna have more on like the general politics and just the world, I feel like everything in this book just felt more relevant. Not even just the political stuff, but also the development of their relationship, and like knowing that this just really builds up the 2 main characters getting together, and then we will actually see them together in the sequel. I just felt like this book felt a little bit more valid. I feel like it was just a little bit lacking as a standalone, but knowing it's the first book in a series, it just makes so much sense. I think that's probably why I enjoyed it more, but I was just really happy because I was actually scared that I would like it less. So the fact that I liked it more just gave me such a warm and fuzzy feeling. I just love Audrey Coulthurst, and hopefully I will actually get to the sequel very soon. But yeah, I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Serpent and Dolph by Shelby Marin. This is an arc that Melanie gifted me from BEA and BookCon. This comes out in September. I want to say it's September 3rd. And I kind of buddy read this with Melanie. Sometimes buddy reads just don't really work. You know, that's just what happens, and that's totally fine. I definitely had issues with it, 100%. But it was just one of those books where you read it and you're just having a good time. You're just enjoying the characters, and I really enjoyed the romance because like a romance between a witch and a witch hunter, like just the dynamics make me very happy. There was some character development in it that was definitely necessary for the story, but I just feel like the way that it played out wasn't well done enough for me personally. You know, when you have a strained relationship like that, like between a witch and a witch hunter, there just needs to be a lot of character development going on in order to like really make it a good thing. And I just felt like even though the character development was there, I just didn't really like the reasons and like where it came from and how it was handled. I think it could have just been handled better, especially considering this is like quite a long book. I just feel like there were a couple of things that just could have been done better. And I think that the romance could have been much more slow burn. Like if this romance had been a little bit more slow burn, this would be an incredible book. And it's again one of those books where I saw the potential. Like that's always my issues. Like I don't mind non-slow burn romances. It's just that when I see huge potential for slow burn and the author doesn't really use it, that's just when I'm like, oh my god, the chance though, you know, just the opportunity. So yeah, again, I overall really enjoyed this. Like I just genuinely had such a good time reading it. I just see a lot of flaws and a lot of things that I would have liked to be done a little bit differently. I still haven't written a review on it, even though I had definitely planned to, and I'm honestly not sure if I still can at this point. I do think there is a lot to say on it. I just no longer sure if I still have things to say because it's been a while. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. Again, not because it's like just really flawless book, just because I had so much fun reading it. Next I read Spinning by Tilly Walden. This is Tilly Walden's memoir as a graphic novel. It was so powerful and impactful and honestly just really heartbreaking, and I like constantly had to remind myself that this is a memoir. I was just so in the story that sometimes I would just forget that this is like real life. I think that's also because it had this really intense atmosphere. I don't really know how to describe that, but when you read it, there's just this atmosphere about it. It just doesn't feel like a memoir. I loved the themes of sexuality and mental health. I think a lot of the mental health portrayal was like super strong. I mean, sexuality theme super strong as well, but like the mental health is what really stood out to me. I also, you know, always like books that have something to do with like dance or everything surrounding that. In this case, obviously ice skating, which is not something that I can like 100% relate to, but that is very close to dance. And just I always like this kind of, you know, like, do I still enjoy doing this, or do I just do it because it's part of my identity at this point, and all these kinds of conflicts that like naturally come up with these kinds of things. So that was another aspect as to why I just really loved it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Sandstone Volume 2, and this one was much more intense than the first volume. Like this dealt with some really heavy stuff, and I was just genuinely not expecting it, but I loved it. And I think that this graphic novel does so much for like BDSM. I think it is really fascinating to see how much the author actually includes about like BDSM culture, and I just feel like so much care is taken with portraying it in a way that is respectful but also realistic. I just think this is so well done, and I just cannot wait to read more volumes because I am completely, totally falling in love with this graphic novel series and the characters and the relationships, and just again, just how it like gives you information in this really great way. And it's also just such beautiful art. And I don't know, man. This is a special kind of graphic novel. And I feel like a lot of people will not really give it a chance because it seems so much like erotica. Considering it's BDSM, it's actually like still pretty tame. And like, I can only just encourage you to like give it a chance if you're ready for just like an adult graphic novel, because like, it's just beautiful. I gave Sandstone Volume 2 4 out of 5 stars because I enjoyed it a little bit less than the first one, but still just, again, I just love this series as a whole. Then I read Twice in a Blue Moon by Christina Lauren. This is another arc that Melanie gave me, and this I also buddy read with Melanie, and this was quite the experience. The first, like, third was so enjoyable, so good, such a lovely romantic storyline. And that was all like set in the past because this is like a second chance romance. And then as soon as we got to the present, it kind of got worse for me with like every page. Like, it was just not fun at all. This is another one where I definitely still want to write a review on it, and I actually think this one is where I remember the things to actually write about. Hopefully there will be a link for this one in the description, but I just didn't really like how the second chance romance played out. Like, I just loved the two characters falling in love for the first time. I think that was just such a lovely storyline, but just the whole second chance aspect, not great. And like, it just had so many elements that I feel like I could have really loved. Like, it is taking place at a film set, and so like we get like scripts of the film, and like that's something that I really love, and I felt really immersed in this other story as well. And I thought it was so easy to like kind of imagine the setting in your head, but I was like, oh, honestly, remembering it, I just realized how angry I was. Like, I remember ranting so much on Snapchat with Melanie because it just made me angry. Like, just the things that happened as to why the characters weren't together anymore in the first place, and then how it was resolved in the present, or wasn't resolved rather. It just was not a good look. Like, second chance romances, I feel like some authors think, oh, like, that's cute to do, but like, that takes a lot of work. Like, you need to do a lot of work as an author to ensure that it just makes sense for the characters to get back together or to fall in love again or whatever. And I just felt like Christina Lauren were kind of like, let's use it, like that's a cute trope, but then didn't actually do the work. And like, I just hate that. I hate that so much. And honestly, I like enjoyed Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating, but after reading that and this one, I just kind of feel like, except for the Unhoneymooners, I don't want to read anything else by Christina Lauren, because I just feel like there's so much good, diverse romance out there, be it like written by people of color, about people of color, or be it queer romance. I just don't think I need to read this mediocre romance by like two white women. Like, sorry to say that, but it is just really mediocre, and I think that their time is kind of up. That's just my opinion, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to step on your toes. And they try to include this thing about like racial stuff in there, and they tried to kind of include it in the film, and there were just these weird comments, but it just kind of seemed like they tried to just seem woke and be like fake woke. It wasn't a good look either. So I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I give it 2.5 out of 5 stars. I guess I read worse, but I just really wasn't a fan. Then I read Beautiful Dreamer by Melissa Braden. This is an adult female romance, and it was so fun. I read this kind of parallel with Twice in a Blue Moon, and so I had this really good way of comparing the two, and Beautiful Dreamer was just so much better. It was really well paced. I absolutely loved the characters, and I loved their developments. I loved the differences between the two and how much they learned from each other and really grew just from like being with each other and like learning about each other. Their chemistry was fantastic. So good, and it just made me feel emotional in so many ways. Like, it made me happy, it made me swoon, it made me cry in the end, and I just love this so much. And what stood out, like especially after reading Twice in a Blue Moon, was that the author took so much time to really resolve the conflict that happened in the book. It wasn't like this thing happening and then like 2 minutes later they're like, oh, I'm sorry, and then it's like fine and that's a happy ending. No, like I think the last fourth all dealt with just like building back trust and just really kind of rediscovering their feelings for each other and just kind of really understanding that they want to be with each other. I just thought it was so well done. And like considering that Twice in a Blue Moon, this whole book is about a second chance romance, whereas in Beautiful Dreamer, it was just the usual conflict that happens. And this book took more time for that conflict than Twice in a Blue Moon did for the main trope of the book. I was just like, that's so weak. Like, that's just so weak. And so Twice in a Blue Moon, like, I felt even less good about it after reading this one, because this one was so fantastic and just dealt with things so very well. For this one, I actually have a full Goodreads review, so if you want to read more of my thoughts, I will leave a link to that in the description down below. But I just really, really loved it, and I am so glad that I finally read something else by Melissa Braden, because like First Position is a book that I absolutely loved, and like it just makes me want to read the whole backlog of Melissa Braden books. I think that she is awesome and I cannot wait to read more by her. I gave Beautiful Dreamer 4 out of 5 stars. Then the reading rush happened, and again I have a separate review for it, but I'm just quickly going to go through what I read and what was my rating. I read A Little Light Mischief by Cat Sebastian, which I gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. I listened to the audiobook of Things No One Will Tell Fat Girls by Jessica Baker, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I read Always Never Yours by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I read Playing House by Ruby Lang, which I gave 3 stars. I read Mooncakes by Suzanne Walker and Wendy Xu, which I gave 4 stars. I read All Systems Red by Martha Wells, which I gave 3 stars. I read The Miseducation of Cameron Post by Emily M. Danforth, which I gave 5 stars. And I read Are You Listening by Tilly Walden, which I gave 4 stars. And then after reading rush, I obviously felt a little bit burned out, but I still managed to kind of just read 2 more books that I was still in the middle of and then finish another graphic novel. And so first, after the reading rush, I finished the audiobook of These Witches Don't Burn by Elizabeth Sterling, narrated by Kristen De Mercurio. I had some like kind of personal issues with this one. It had like a really big trigger at the end of the book, and it just kind of really caught me off guard. Like, it was just something that usually like slightly triggers me anyway, but just the way that this thing happened was just very close to something that I had experienced. And so I just felt like I had just this bitter taste in my mouth for the whole rest of the book. And then also it was just this really big event that happened in the main character's life, and I just felt like there were not enough repercussions for that, especially knowing a similar situation and like having experienced something similar but not even as severe. I just couldn't believe how little time there was for the main character to process what happened. And so that kind of had me upset as well. In the beginning, I was kind of like, okay, this is a personal issue, you know, this is not something that's the book's fault or anything, but just the way it was dealt with afterwards and how there was not really enough time to actually deal with it, that kind of left me feeling a little bit like, I just thought that was kind of questionable. The issue was that the main conflict wasn't resolved by the time this big event happened. And yeah, I mean, I know that there's gonna be a sequel, so I'm like, probably this is gonna be a big topic in the sequel, but I'm not really sure if I want to read the sequel. I'm just feeling like the immediate effects of what happened should have been there like much more. In general, overall, I think it is enjoyable. I really like the magic system and the different kinds of witches. I enjoyed a lot of the characters. I enjoyed the romance, and I really enjoyed the kind of relationship that the main character had with her ex-girlfriend, and kind of exploring that and what happened to them and why they broke up and stuff like that. I think there were some really interesting themes explored through that. But yeah, I don't know. It was just in general, like, it was a good book, but I was expecting something different from it as well. Like, this is super action-packed. This is not like a fun, fluffy, like, haha, witchy book. There's a lot of shit going down in this. And it is like downright almost scary at some points. And I just didn't expect this from this book. And then again, just on top of that, just this big thing happening at the end that just caught me off guard. It wasn't the best reading experience, but I think it is a good book overall. And I think if you are interested, definitely I would recommend it. Just don't expect it to be like a fun and fluffy read, because it's not at all. I gave These Witches Don't Burn 3 out of 5 stars because I felt like that was just the most fair rating that I could give it. Then I listened to Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno, narrated by Anne-Marie Guerrera. This is a YA contemporary that very heavily deals with like family and culture, or rather like heritage and like where you're from and just dealing with that. And it takes place in this small town, and I really liked the dynamics between the different people living in this small town and how they kind of helped each other out, and just that whole dynamic. I really like the main character. I think she's a super strong, interesting, intriguing character to read about, and I also really like the romance in it. It is actually like a really small part, especially compared to like the whole family relationships, but what we got of the romance I thought was really beautiful. The love interest was like super great. I just think like maybe one of my favorite male love interests that I read in the past couple of books. And it's like this guy that's like, you know, he's like relatively big, has like tattoos and stuff like that, but then he's just a really soft guy, and I just love that. So I was just really having a good time. I honestly can't even say that much about it, but I just really enjoyed it and I had a good time listening to it. Is it something where I will buy a physical copy to reread it? No. Is it something that I will probably forget in like about a week? Yeah, quite honestly. But I had a good time while reading it, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you are just looking for like a Latinx character who is, you know, kind of exploring family and heritage. There were just a lot of good elements in it, and I definitely see why a lot of people like super love it and really connect to it. I gave Don't Date Rosa Santos 3.5 out of 5 stars. And finally in July I read The Avant-Guards Volume 1 by Carly Austin and Noah Hayes. This is a new graphic novel series that I fell in love with. I loved it so much. Highly recommend this. If you love graphic novels like Giant Days or Lumberjanes, I think you're gonna love The Avant-Guards as well. Super diverse cast in so many aspects. People of color, different kind of queer identities, someone who uses they them pronouns. At the center of it seems to be a female-female relationship, although that's only kind of really developing right now, but I think this is gonna be a big thing in the following volumes. And then also it just features this cast of characters that are so different in like personalities and styles as well, and I love that. I love seeing when like the grumpy goth hangs out with like the quirky witch and like just the sports type, and just so many great characters. And just, it's one of those graphic novels where I feel like everybody will find someone that they will relate to, and that's just my favorite. That's my absolute fucking favorite, and it just made me so happy and gave me so many good feelings. And honestly, usually I'm not someone who's into like sports, because this does like, it's about like basketball, like this is a team of people who play basketball, and I wasn't really sure how I was gonna feel about the sports element, but like having these amazing characters and having such wonderful, beautiful art as well, like I didn't even mind or care about the sports element. On the contrary, just with the beautiful art and how it was done, I actually really enjoyed the sports element. So I love this so much, and I was not expecting it. I was like, oh, this is going to be like a diverse graphic novel, that's cool. But I just read it and I was like, hello, I have a new love. Goodbye, Giant Days. I'm sorry, but this one made me so happy. I highly recommend this again, especially if you love something like Giant Days or Lumberjanes. I cannot wait for more volumes. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, but I see so much potential. And yeah, that's everything that I read in July. Let me know how your month was going. Did Reading Rush also just really help you with your reading this month? And yeah, I make new videos every Wednesday and Sunday with occasion reviews on Friday, so click subscribe to never miss anything and hit the little bell so you get notified as well. And thank you so much for watching. I guess I'll see you soon. Bye!